Picture this. You're fast asleep, mouth open, breathing slow, completely unaware of anything around you. In that state, you are, in every practical sense, defenseless. Now stop imagining your bed and imagine a tent instead. Just a sheet of thin fabric, almost laughably flimsy, standing between you and a wilderness packed with animals that could kill you without much effort. Big cats, wolves, bears, creatures that can pick up your pulse from yards away, catch your scent from well over a mile out, and see in total darkness while you lie there with your eyes shut. And still, morning after morning, you open your eyes again. How come? Stop and actually think about it. A person asleep is nothing but soft, still, unresisting flesh. Can't sprint, can't swing a fist, can't even notice danger until it's already on top of them. Logic says predators should be treating campsites like a nightly buffet line, but that's not what happens. It almost never happens, and there isn't a single reason why. It's a stack of reasons, each stranger than the one before, and together they reveal something like an unspoken truce between people and the wild. One older than cities, older than farming, older than history, as we usually define it. This runs deep. Let's get into it. Let's begin with something that sounds arrogant but is pure biology. You are, statistically speaking, frightening. Not you personally scrolling through this right now, you seem harmless enough. But humans, as a species, register to predators as something to be genuinely afraid of. It isn't obvious just from looking at us. No claws, no real speed, not especially strong for our size, and our night vision is garbage. On paper, we look like a failed experiment, the kind of animal that should have gone extinct within its first few thousand years, rather than end up dictating the rules on every continent it walked onto. Yet a 2019 study out of UC Santa Cruz uncovered something striking. Researchers played recordings of ordinary human speech near mountain lions, pumas, cougars, whatever you want to call them, out in California's Santa Cruz range. Just people chatting, nothing threatening. The cougars bolted. They fled just as fast, sometimes faster, than when they heard barking dogs. These are animals capable of taking down a full-grown deer with ease, dragging carcasses uphill, apex efficiency on 4 legs. And a recording of casual conversation sent them running. This wasn't a fluke. The same research found pumas walking away from carcasses they'd already killed, food they were actively eating, the moment human voices carried through the air. They abandoned the meal entirely. That's an enormous waste from a survival math perspective. Killing something and then not eating it means all that effort produced 0 calories. And they did it anyway, because being anywhere near humans felt worse than going hungry. This lines up with decades of observations from biologists working across continents. Lions in South Africa's Kruger Reserve cut back their movement wherever human activity picks up. Tigers across India steer clear of villages even when those villages sit right in prime hunting territory. Jaguars in the Amazon basin have shifted their entire movement patterns to dodge zones with regular human presence. None of these animals are physically unable to attack us. They've simply decided, as a species, generation after generation, that engaging with humans isn't worth whatever they'd gain, and the explanation behind that decision is brutal. We've spent so long hunting and killing large predators that we've actually reshaped their gene pool. Consider the timeline. Humans have been serious hunters for roughly 2 million years. We drove mammoths to extinction. We wiped giant ground sloths, woolly rhinoceroses, saber-toothed cats, and cave bears off the map, creatures that had survived multiple ice ages but couldn't survive us. In North America alone, we pushed wolves to the brink across the entire continent and erased mountain lions from the whole eastern half of it. We poisoned, trapped, and shot down predators so relentlessly for so many centuries that today's survivors descend directly from the individuals who were smart enough to keep away from us. That's not poetic language. That's literal natural selection. Bold lions near camps got shot. Wolves that targeted livestock got hunted down. The ones who kept their distance, who treated people as a threat rather than a target, lived to pass that instinct forward. Across countless generations, that wariness stopped being a learned behavior and became hardwired. It's baked into the default programming of nearly every large predator sharing land with us today. So when a leopard catches a whiff of you at night, something ancient fires off deep in its nervous system. Not a conscious thought. It's not reasoning through human history. Just an old, inherited alarm bell. Stay away, don't engage, keep moving. That alarm has been handed down from every single ancestor of that leopard who lived through an encounter with people. It's memory carried in the blood. Now let's discuss odor. You probably never think about your own scent because you're constantly around other humans and you've tuned it out completely. But to a predator whose nose might be anywhere from 10 to 100,000 times more capable than yours, you're putting off a massive, complicated, and completely unfamiliar chemical broadcast. A bear's sense of smell reportedly beats a bloodhound's by roughly sevenfold. Wolves can pick up scent trails from nearly 2 miles out under good conditions. Big cats carry a special sensory structure in the roof of the mouth, the Jacobson's organ, that lets them essentially taste the surrounding air and decode chemical signals in ways we can't fully grasp. When one of these animals gets close to a sleeping person, it's hit with a wave of scent information, and most of it doesn't match anything in its database. You smell off. Nylon, polyester, whatever chemical residue clings to synthetic gear. Leftover food smell from your last meal or the snacks stashed in your bag. Layers of soap, shampoo, sunscreen, bug spray, an artificial chemical stew with no natural equivalent anywhere in the wild. Strip all that away and underneath you smell vaguely primate, but that's not quite the same as deer, antelope, or rabbit. The actual prey these animals have spent millions of years learning to recognize and chase. A predator's hunting drive isn't some general urge to kill anything that moves. It's a precisely calibrated system built for particular targets, tuned over millions of years to recognize one very specific set of shapes, sounds, and smells, and nothing outside that set. A wolf gets triggered by the specific gait of hoofed animals. A lion's attack response switches on based on the shape, speed, and smell of creatures it's hunted thousands of times over. You simply don't match the template. You're outside the system entirely. And things that fall outside the system usually get treated with suspicion, not aggression. Then there's the fire factor, arguably one of the smartest things our species ever stumbled onto. Fire triggers an almost universal fear reaction across nearly every land animal on Earth. That's not something learned through experience, it's built in from birth. Creatures that instinctively fled fire survived wildfires. The ones that didn't. This fear runs so deep that animals raised in labs, who've never once encountered actual flame, will still flinch and retreat at the mere smell of smoke. It's coded straight into their evolutionary wiring. Humans got control of fire somewhere between 1 and 2 million years ago, and ever since, sleeping beside a flame has been the default setup. It wasn't purely for heat or cooking. Whether or not we realized it at the time, it also worked as a deterrent. A fire doesn't just warm you up, it sends a message out into the darkness. Something dangerous, something that commands fire, is present here. Stay back. Predators absorbed that lesson so thoroughly, over so many generations, that the message no longer needs conscious interpretation. It just triggers instant avoidance. We figured that trick out long before farming, long before pottery, long before writing existed. Fire came first. Not a bad call at all, considering everything else we'd eventually build depended on that one discovery first. Let's also demolish the biggest misconception about predators, one that decades of movies have gotten completely backwards. Predators aren't reckless. This point matters enormously. That image of the apex predator as some fearless killing machine willing to attack anything that crosses its path? That's fiction, plain and simple. In reality, large predators are extremely cautious about what they choose to engage, because they have no choice but to be careful. A wolf has no sick leave. A lion has no health coverage. A torn leg, a deep bite, a ruined eye, any of these can mean a slow starvation death. In the wild, there's no vet to patch you up. Either the body heals on its own while the animal somehow still manages to hunt and eat, or it doesn't heal, and death follows slowly and painfully, with no exceptions and no second chances. That means every choice a predator makes about whether to engage something boils down to a cost-benefit survival equation. Is this potential meal worth the injury risk? Do I know this prey well enough to predict how it'll react? Is my chance of pulling off a clean kill high enough to justify burning this much energy? A sleeping human flunks that equation on several fronts. First, it's unfamiliar territory. Predators feel most confident going after prey they've studied repeatedly. They know how a gazelle bolts, where its weak points sit, how it kicks when cornered. They have zero clue how a human will react. We're chaotic by comparison. We might wake up shouting. We might be carrying tools. Other humans might be nearby and respond instantly. We might flail in totally unpredictable directions. For an animal trying to minimize danger, That much unpredictability is a glaring warning sign. Second, size matters more than people assume. Standing upright, humans are actually fairly large. Our bipedal stance makes us look bigger and more imposing than most prey of similar body weight. Scientists studying predator-prey behavior have pointed out that walking upright is essentially a built-in threat display. It's the same posture gorillas adopt to look intimidating, the same one bears use to appear more dangerous. A species that defaults to that stance constantly reads as naturally assertive to other animals. Even lying down asleep, the human silhouette looks strange in a way that doesn't scream, easy target. Third, and maybe the most important point, why even bother? Easier options are almost always sitting nearby. A predator in a healthy, intact territory has plenty of familiar prey. It's comfortable chasing, prey that fits its natural hunting template. Going after something bizarre, unpredictable, and potentially dangerous when there's a perfectly good antelope or rabbit within reach just doesn't add up mathematically. The risk versus reward calculation collapses. Here's something rarely mentioned in this discussion. Your sleep isn't nearly as deep as it feels. This is genuinely one of the stranger aspects of human biology. Sleep unfolds in cycles. You drop into deep, slow-wave stages, then rise back into lighter phases, including REM, where your brain stays fairly active. Researchers have discovered that during those lighter stages, your brain keeps monitoring the environment surprisingly well. Sounds still get processed. Unusual noises are far more likely to jolt you awake than familiar ones. Scientists refer to this as the sentinel function of sleep, the idea that even at rest, animals, humans included, maintain a partial lookout over their surroundings. During lighter sleep phases, your brain keeps filtering incoming sensory data, flagging anything odd or potentially threatening. A branch cracking nearby, the rustle of something large moving through brush, a shift in air pressure and smell that signals something approaching. These cues can yank you toward consciousness far quicker than expected. This isn't accidental. Ancestors who slept too heavily, who stayed fully unresponsive to nighttime danger, were less likely to survive the night at all. The ones who slept lighter, who could go from unconscious to standing in seconds, were the ones who lived long enough to pass on their genes. Over hundreds of thousands of years, human sleep got calibrated to stay light enough to react to threats. We sleep in shorter, lighter cycles than most large mammals, largely because our evolutionary past assumed the darkness always held something worth waking up for. So even though unconsciousness feels totally vulnerable, you're actually running a fairly capable early warning system the whole time. Imperfect, but very much active, quietly working in the background the entire time you think you're completely gone. Then there's safety in numbers. Humans rarely camp alone. We travel and sleep in groups, and those groups react together. Predators throughout the animal kingdom understand group behavior intimately because their usual prey also moves in herds and packs. A wildebeest tucked into the center of a herd is far safer than one drifting at the edge. A fish swimming inside a school is much harder to pick off than one that's strayed away. Predators aren't just hunting prey, they're hunting isolation. They watch for the straggler, the one that fell behind, the one cut off from the group. A campsite full of sleeping people is, functionally, a herd. And worse for a predator, it's a herd where one person waking up and shouting will very likely wake everyone else. That group response possibility is a serious deterrent for any predator hoping for a quiet, low-risk kill. The chance of the hunt spiraling into a chaotic mob defense scenario is exactly the outcome predators are built to steer clear of. Now, to be fair, this wouldn't be a responsible video without acknowledging the exceptions. None of this makes anyone bulletproof. When attacks on sleeping or resting humans do occur, they follow a recognizable pattern. The normal rules have broken down somehow. An injured predator that can no longer chase its usual prey. A starving one whose habitat has collapsed and whose food supply has vanished. One that's had so much exposure to humans that its inherited caution has eroded. Something that can happen alarmingly fast when tourists start feeding wild animals, teaching them to link people with food instead of danger. Or simply an old, desperate predator past its physical peak, unable to catch what it once could. The Tsavo lions in Kenya remain the textbook example. Back in 1898, 2 males killed somewhere between roughly 35 and 135 railway laborers over close to 9 months. Historians still argue over the exact count, and the story grew larger with each retelling. What often gets left out, though, is that these were not typical lions. Both lacked manes, unusual for males, and one had serious dental damage that likely made hunting normal prey far harder. These weren't examples of ordinary lion behavior. They were outliers shaped by extraordinary circumstances. The Champawat tiger, blamed for an estimated 436 deaths across India and Nepal in the early 20th century, was eventually discovered by hunter Jim Corbett to have been shot in the jaw at some point earlier in its life, breaking 2 canine teeth. It could no longer hunt its natural prey properly. Between that injury and shrinking habitat, it turned to the only prey left that it could realistically catch. This same pattern shows up in nearly every documented case of a large predator attacking humans while resting or camping. Something had gone wrong first. The usual calculation broke down. Inherited caution got overridden by sheer desperation, which is exactly why the general rule holds up almost everywhere the ecosystem is intact, the predator is healthy, and people haven't done something to scramble the signals, like leaving food unsecured, approaching wild animals directly, or skipping the fire because it seemed like an unnecessary hassle. There's one more layer worth saving for last, because honestly, it's the strangest part of the whole story. We've become so effective at making wildlife fear us that it's now triggering consequences nobody planned for. That same 2019 Santa Cruz study didn't just show pumas fleeing from human voices, it revealed that this fear ripples through entire food webs in ways that are hard to fully manage. When pumas steer clear of human-heavy zones, deer in those areas face far less hunting pressure. Deer numbers climb. Those growing deer populations then overgraze the local plant life. Meanwhile, smaller predators, coyotes, bobcats, foxes, also pull back from areas near people, which means the rodent populations they'd normally keep in check start booming instead. The whole system shifts, and it shifts entirely because of us, because the fear we've instilled over thousands of years radiates outward through the ecosystem like an invisible signal. We're reshaping the behavior of every predator on the food chain across whole continents without ever directly touching most of those animals, simply by existing. Simply by being the thing evolution long ago taught every one of them to fear and avoid. The most dangerous creature on this planet is the one that mastered fire before it mastered anything else. The one that's been reshaping entire ecosystems not just through predation but through fear itself, dictating what other species are too afraid to hunt. The one that sleeps lightly, moves in groups, and carries roughly 10,000 generations of surviving ancestors written into its biology. That's you. That's what you actually are. So next time you're zipped into a tent somewhere remote, listening to whatever's stirring beyond that thin nylon wall, and a flicker of primal unease creeps in, that's completely normal. That instinct is exactly what kept your ancestors alive long enough to produce you. But whatever's moving around out there in the dark, it isn't coming inside. It already knows better than to try.